All right, let's dive in. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on something you've definitely experienced, but probably never really seen, the hidden blueprint that secretly shapes pretty much every language class out there. So let's get into it and explore this thing level by level.
You've got to wonder about this, right? You take a language class, and it's all about repeating phrases over and over. But then your friend's class is like all about playing games and acting out scenes. Is it just the teacher's style, or is there something bigger going on behind the scenes?
Well, the answer is, it is not random at all. Behind every single choice a teacher makes, from the textbook they pick to the homework they assign, there's this whole underlying philosophy. It's like an architectural plan for the entire class. And today, we're going to show you exactly how to read that blueprint. Okay, so this whole framework was laid out by a linguist named Edward Anthony, and he broke it down into 3 levels. The easiest way to think about it is going from the architect's big idea to the building plans, and then finally to the actual day-to-day construction work. We've got the approach, the design, and the procedure. Let's start at the very bottom with the foundation.
First up is the approach. This is the really big picture stuff. It's not about the fun activities or the grammar charts. It's about the deep-down beliefs a teacher has about what language even is and how people learn things. It's the why that drives absolutely everything else.
So the official definition says an approach is axiomatic. And that's really just a fancy way of saying these are the core beliefs that are taken as truths. They're the starting point. Before a single lesson is ever planned, a teacher or a curriculum designer has already bought into a certain set of ideas.
And you know, these core beliefs can be totally different from each other. Take this for example. What do you think language is? If you have a structural view, you see language as this beautiful, complex system of grammar rules and vocabulary. So the goal is to master all the parts of that system. But if you have an interactional view, you see language as a tool for connecting with people. And suddenly, the goal isn't perfect grammar, it's being able to actually communicate.
And the same thing happens with ideas about how we learn. And this right here, this is why those 2 classrooms we talked about looked so different. A teacher who leans toward behaviorism thinks learning is all about forming good habits. So you're going to see a lot of drills, a lot of repetition, trying to avoid mistakes. But a teacher who follows constructivism, they believe students have to actively build their own understanding. So their classroom is going to be full of problem solving and exploring. And yeah, even making mistakes, because mistakes are just seen as part of the process.
And that is really the most important thing to get here. This abstract, theoretical level, the approach. It's the foundation for the entire building. Everything else gets built on top of this.
Okay, so with that foundation in place, let's go up to the second level, the design. If the approach was the why, the design is the what. This is where those big philosophical ideas start to get turned into an actual concrete plan for the class.
And believe me, this plan gets really specific. The design lays out the objectives, like what should students be able to do by the end. It decides on the syllabus. Are we going to learn chapter by chapter based on grammar, or are we going to learn based on situations, like ordering in a restaurant? And maybe most critically, it defines the roles that everyone and everything in that classroom is supposed to play.
Just think about how this changes the teacher's role. Is the teacher the sage on the stage, standing at the front of the room as the main source of all knowledge? That's what you get from that structural behaviorist approach. Or is the teacher the guide on the side, more of a facilitator who helps students discover things for themselves? That comes directly from that more interactional, constructivist approach.
And of course, that totally flips the script for the student too. Are you expected to be a passive recipient, just listen, repeat, and respond perfectly? Or are you supposed to be an active problem solver, someone who speaks up, negotiates meaning with other students, and actually contributes to the class? The design of the course decides this for you before you even walk in the door.
Okay, finally, let's get to the top floor, the procedure. This is the how. This is what you can actually see and hear. It's the part of the blueprint that's been brought to life right there in the classroom.
So procedure is basically all the techniques, all the practices, all the little behaviors that a teacher uses day in and day out. It's the nuts and bolts, the daily work of carrying out the plan from the design, which, as we now know, is all based on the philosophy from the approach. See how it all connects?
So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, here's a great example from a method called text-based instruction. Notice how logical this is. The teacher doesn't just throw a text at the students. First, they build up the context. Then they model it and they break it down. Then they build a new one with the students. Then the students try it on their own. And finally, they connect it to other things.
Every single one of those is a specific technique, a part of the procedure.
So think about it. Those grammar drills, that's procedure. The vocabulary games, procedure. All the group work, the presentations, all the stuff that we usually just call teaching, that's actually just the final visible piece of this much, much deeper structure. It's the procedure in action.
You know, understanding this blueprint also helps explain why teaching methods seem to change all the time. Why do trends come and go? Why was one method super popular for decades, only to be totally replaced by something new? Well, it's because the blueprint itself is constantly being updated.
So what causes these updates? Sometimes it's a massive shift in science. A new theory in psychology just completely changes the approach. Other times, it's more about institutional support. A government decides all its schools are going to use a certain design. And honestly, a lot of the time it just comes down to what's practical. Is a method too complicated for new teachers to use, or does it just not fit with the country's cultural traditions about education?
This constant change is just part of the DNA of language teacher. I think this quote from our source material really sums it up. It says that the sheer number of different designs proposed in a short time makes you wonder why the field has so many contrasting views. And what this tells us is that as our core beliefs, our approach, continue to evolve, so will everything else.
So, we've gone all the way from the deep foundational philosophy to the nitty-gritty of classroom activities. And now, we want to hand this framework over to you. Think of it as your own personal toolkit for analyzing teaching.
And here it is. This is what the original academic model looks like. Now, don't worry about all the tiny text. The big idea is just to see the flow. See how it all starts over on the left with approach? Those fundamental ideas then flow down and shape the design in the middle. The syllabus, the roles, all of that. And that, in turn, dictates what happens moment to moment in the procedure on the right. It's a clear chain reaction, from big theory to tiny practice.
So why is this so important? Because now you can walk into any classroom and see what's really going on. You can decode it. You can start asking questions. What's the underlying approach here? How did that shape the design of this class? And are the daily activities, the procedures, actually in line with that big vision? This just makes you a smarter, more aware, and way more effective teacher or learner.
So there you have it. The hidden blueprint is now yours, and we'll leave you with just one last question to chew on. Now that you can see this three-level structure, how does it change the way you think about your own learning experiences? Not just with languages, but with, well, anything. Thanks for joining us.